What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here to examine another issue of the X-Men. Today, I am examining X-Men issue 31, edited by Stan Lee, written by Roy Thomas, with art by Werner Roth, who's back on penciling this issue, and inks by John Tartaglione, and Sam Rosen doing the lettering. This issue has the X-Men fight an Iron Man-type villain called the Cobalt Man, another villain who has nothing to do with the Factor 3 storyline that this series kind of dipped its toes in a little bit a few issues ago. And it's being more and more frustrating that this series is getting further and further away from the Factor 3 storyline without resolving it. And it's not that I thought that was the greatest storyline that this series has ever done, it's that they set it up and then they didn't conclude it. We still don't know who is in charge of Factor 3. All we know is that there are a few bad guys who work for Factor 3 who have attacked the X-Men. But we don't know who is in charge of all of this. We don't know why they're doing what they're doing. We just know there's this big sinister organization, and they keep bringing it up, but then the main threat of the issue has nothing to do with Factor 3. The last couple of issues have had nothing to do with it, and once again, it looks like next issue will have nothing to do with it, maybe. Next issue is going to have the Juggernaut. That was teased at the end, but maybe he's working for Factor 3. I don't know. But it is a little bit irritating that they set up this storyline with a potentially interesting villain, and then they're not doing anything with that. I don't know if Roy Thomas got bored and just didn't want to do anything with this story after he started it, or maybe he was told, hey, why don't you stretch this out a little bit, or maybe he just didn't know what he was doing and he needed some time to figure out what to do with the higher-ups at Factor 3. I have no idea. But with this issue, I like quite a few things about it, and then there are some things that I wasn't crazy about. My favorite thing here is that this issue finally puts to rest the Warren Worthington-Scott Summers feud over Jean Grey. The beginning of the issue, the X-Men are fighting in a danger room simulation, or training exercise, I should say, and then Professor X says, you guys all did great, so you can go on vacation. And as soon as he said that, you know that that means that something bad is going to happen, and they're all going to have to get called back from vacation. And Professor X returns to whatever experiments he's working on that he doesn't want the X-Men to know about. That has been hinted at for a couple of issues now. It wasn't hinted at last issue, but I think the issue before that hinted at it a little bit. We once again see this door in the basement that the professor doesn't want anyone going into. He doesn't mention anything about the door in this issue, but it's the door that he wants to remain closed. He has a couple of rats that he's experimenting on. I have no idea what this experiment is. I read these issues years ago, and I do not remember what this experiment is. So I hope that they don't drag this little subplot out for several issues. I hope we get some resolution to that also. But Professor X wants everyone out of the house. Cyclops says, I think I'll stay here and help the professor with whatever he's working on. And Professor's like, no, I need you to take these books to Jean. She lent us these books on Mayan culture a few issues ago when we fought El Tigre. So I need you to take these books back to Jean. And speaking of El Tigre, at the beginning of the issue, Warren is saying that he feels great. He feels like he's back in fighting shape, and that's a reference to him getting injured on their little 2 or 3 part storyline where they fought El Tigre. So that's kind of a nice little reference to a previous issue. I wasn't expecting that. But Professor X has ulterior motives here. One, he wants everyone out of the house so he can do his experiments in peace. But also he's thinking to himself, I know that Scott is in love with Jean, has been for a while, but he doesn't want to tell her. So I thought maybe I'd kind of nudge him in the right direction, because Warren said, I'm going to go out into town in my Ferrari or whatever, my convertible. I'm just going to see where the car takes me. And Cyclops is thinking to himself, Professor X knew that Warren has a thing for Jean, and that Warren was going out into town. Why didn't he ask Warren to take these books to Jean? And then Warren says, hey, Scott, I have an idea. I like Jean, you like Jean, and you know where this is going, right? No, not where you thought it was going. He says, why don't we both just go to Jean, and ask her which one of us she's interested in? Are you disappointed? That's okay. So anyway, he says, let's just put an end to this. Let's just go ahead and ask her, are you interested in me, or are you interested in Cyclops? And Cyclops says, yeah, let's do that. I am so excited. I have been so sick and tired of this will they, won't they thing going on between the three of them, which anyone who knows anything about X-Men now knows that Jean doesn't end up with Warren, which makes it even worse, I think, since we already know that she's not going to end up with Warren. I don't want to spend 30-something issues with Warren pining after her when she has only eyes for Cyclops, only has eyes for Cyclops, and he only has eyes for her. I really just wanted Warren to move on, and he does. I love that. That is easily my favorite thing about this issue. And then he's out at a club, and he meets Candy Southern, who gets her first appearance here. He knows her from when he was a teenager, before he became one of the X-Men, and it seems like these two are hitting it off great. And Candy will be an on-again, off-again presence in Warren's life for the next roughly 20 years. She kind of gets phased out during the X Factor series in the 80s, but she is kind of in the background of Warren's life for a while now. So whenever I was first reading this issue, I was surprised to see her show up this soon. I know she shows up in the Dark Phoenix saga very briefly, and I thought that was her first appearance, but I was surprised that she shows up in the 60s here. The thing that I don't like about this issue is that it takes over half the issue for anything to actually happen with the bad guy. Ted Roberts, who you might remember, goes to college with Jean. His older brother comes by, and he worked for Tony Stark. And then he says, for whatever reason, I'm not going to get into it right now, I have formed my own company now. And then they go to his lab to kind of look at it. It's Scott, Jean, Ted, and his older brother, Ralph. And I should say, before they do this, Ralph was trying to show off to his younger brother pole vaulting, which I've never seen a human being successfully pole vault in real life. So I don't even know how you do it, but apparently Ralph doesn't either, because he breaks the pole while he's trying to do it, and he hits his head. And then he says, I'm not going to the doctor, I don't want them to know that I hit my head pole vaulting and that I'm too heavy for this, so I guess I'm out. But anyway, they go to the lab, and then Ralph says, hey Ted, come here. While they're looking at these pictures of the Earth's core, I want to show you something. And it's a Iron Man-esque suit. It's made out of cobalt, or the power source is made out of cobalt, I guess. And he says the only problem with it is after 2 hours, the cobalt will become super hot and will explode, which to me seems like that makes this suit a failure. Iron Man's suit doesn't have a 2-hour limit. I know in the 60s there were some problems with his suit that he doesn't have now. At one point he had to like plug it into the wall while he was wearing it, so there were downsides to Iron Man's suit, but I don't ever remember Iron Man's suit having a 2-hour limit where it would explode if he used it that long. So it seems like he acts like, yeah, it's really great, it can do all the stuff Iron Man's suit can. Yeah, but it will explode after 2 hours. And he talks about how Iron Man is a traitor because he will not give the suit to the U.S. government. So shades of Iron Man 2 there. And he says, once I get this suit working, I'm going to give it to the government because Iron Man is a traitor. And I don't know why. It doesn't seem like the government would actually pay him for the suit, unless they would. This is a pre-Watergate comic, so maybe Roy Thomas and Stan Lee and Werner Roth, maybe they all had more of a positive look at the government than I do. But I don't think they would pay you for this suit, and you're working really hard on it. Maybe he thinks that he'll get some government contracts if he just gives them the suit that Iron Man won't give them. But I think once they find out there's a 2-hour limit, they're just going to say, oh, okay, let's just throw that in the trash. Anyway, he puts it on, and then his younger brother says, well, you might want to take it off now because 2-hour limit and all that, and he says something about Iron Man, and then Ralph immediately becomes a deranged supervillain when his younger brother mentions Iron Man, and he wants to go and fight Iron Man, and he keeps calling Iron Man a traitor because he won't give the suit to the government, and so Ted has to go and try and stop his brother because his brother will explode if he keeps the suit on for too long. And since Jean and Scott were there at the lab, they find out about this, and then they fight Cobalt Man a little bit. They summon the other X-Men. They have these new signal watches. This is the first time that they've used these, and somehow it ties to Professor X's telepathy. I don't get it. Cyclops pushes a button, and then he says, Professor X normally wouldn't be able to hear my thoughts from this range, but I can push this button and his telepathy can hear the electronic radio signal? That's a little silly. I feel like you could have just invented a fancy-looking 1960s cell phone, which the radio watch almost is that. This kind of thing was like a Bond gadget, sort of, but then they try to tie it to Professor X's telepathy, which is weird, and at this time, the X-Men books, I guess, were playing it fast and loose with the powers, because I remember a few issues ago, Professor X used his telepathy on some kind of inanimate object. I thought that was a little weird, so I guess at this time they don't really have it nailed down exactly what Professor X's telepathy can do. Nowadays, I don't think a signal watch could activate his telepathy. But he says, well, they're not in in too much danger, so I'll just summon the other X-Men and I'll stay here and work on whatever it is I'm working on, and that's fine. We don't need a guy in a wheelchair out here helping these guys. They graduated back in like issue 11 or something, so they should be able to handle this on their own. And then, spoilers, they managed to get the suit cooled off, and then it doesn't explode. They get it off Ralph, and he's back to normal. I was really certain that this was going to be a two-parter, because over halfway into the issue, we still had not met Cobalt Man. And then suddenly, Ralph puts on the thing, and then he becomes Cobalt Man. Nowadays, I feel like you would need like 5 issues slowly developing Ralph, having some kind of mental problem that would make him want to turn against Iron Man. You wouldn't have him hit his head pole vaulting and then suddenly become deranged and want to attack Iron Man. I think that's a little flimsy, but I did not want this to be a two-parter. I was having flashbacks to all the different multi-part arcs that we've had in the series that did not need to be as long as they were. 3-part Sentinel storylines, 2-part Magneto taking over the Mansion storylines, stuff that really did not need to be as long as it was. I was not looking forward to a two-parter with Cobalt Man. I'm really glad that they did not do that. They wrapped everything up in this issue. Like I said, no mention of Factor 3 except for Professor X saying they haven't been doing anything in America for a while, so we're good. Even though I'm pretty sure these guys were a European organization. Banshee is Irish, I think. I mentioned that he went to Scotland a few issues ago, but he did not. He went to Ireland. I was mistaken. I apologize to any Irish or Scottish who might have been offended. I don't know who in that equation would be offended at that, but I apologize. Anyway, he says they're not doing anything in America, so you guys can go on a double date, Iceman and Beast. As soon as he said, you guys can take a vacation, I didn't remember very much about this comic. I knew it had something to do with one of the Roberts brothers, but as soon as he said vacation, I thought, oh no, Beast and Iceman are going on a double date with Zelda and Vera, and they're going to get called away to do an X-Men thing in the middle of a double date. Just once, I'd like to see an issue where Beast and Iceman continue and finish their double date with Zelda and Vera, and you can still do some superhero stuff with the other X-Men. You could have Cyclops out in the park, and he stops a mugger or something like that. But I do not want to keep seeing the same old with Beast, Iceman, and Vera and Zelda. It's the same as Scott and Jean doing the same old story, same old song and dance for 30 issues, where Scott has feelings for her, she has feelings for him, but neither of them will voice their feelings, and it just stays in that status quo forever. It gets boring after a while. I want to see something different. I either want to see Vera and Zelda actually break up with these two clowns who keep standing them up in the middle of dates, or I want to see these guys actually go on a date with these ladies and not have to walk away in the middle of a date. Also, we get this guy, Bernard the Poet, who I guess is maybe hitting on Zelda. I don't know. Or maybe he just wants to drink some of her coffee. Iceman, like, freezes it secretly, and then Bernard is like, oh, I better go. So that was weird. Basically, this issue is fine. I didn't like that it took so long to get to the supervillain, but I guess if it got there a little sooner, we would have just had more of the X-Men fighting him until it got to the end of the issue. But I did love that Warren has seemingly given up on pursuing Jean, and now he has found a new romantic interest, Candy Southern. I love that. We still don't have a whole lot of headway on the Scott-Jean thing. It looks like maybe Scott was about to ask Jean out on a date while they were looking at very romantic pictures of the Earth's core. I'm rolling my eyes here. Hold on, let me do it again. There we go. They were about to ask each other on a date, maybe, and then the Cobalt Man attacked Ted, and so they had to go into superhero action. I would like for there to be a little more forward momentum on their relationship. I get it, Scott is kind of timid when he's not in combat mode, but come on, man, it's been 30 issues. It's been like 5 years, maybe not quite 5 years, but it's been a long time. I'd really like to see a little bit of development on that. This issue was fine. I liked it better than the previous issue. I do want to see more stuff with Factor 3. I don't want to see them keep saying, remember Factor 3 who we fought that one time, and then not fight them again. I want to see them get back to that pretty soon, and I'm afraid it's going to be a little while before we do. That's about all that I have to say about this issue. I enjoyed myself with this one. It could have been better, but this was not bad. I think this is my favorite issue that I've read in a while. With that being said, let's consider this issue examined.